19 June 2020, we are observing World Sickle Cell Day, and I welcome all you friends and dignitaries to the webinar of National Sickle Cell Conclave. I am Manvi, professional language expert working for one of the largest Indian storytelling platforms, but also a sickle cell disease survivor. And if I have to describe sickle cell in my own words, it's not just a blood disorder which affects millions of Indians, but what it actually affects our dreams. People living with sickle cell also lives with a permanent uncertainty, often not able to complete their education or opt for their dream jobs, because apparently they can never be sure which will be the next thing that sickle cell doing in their body. As work on improving the quality for life for sickle cell warriors should be essential, we also hope that we will be able to work on prevention of sickle cell to stop new births with sickle cell as well. Given that, I feel privileged to be hosting this conclave on World Sickle Cell Day, which will surely bring a ray of hope for sickle cell survivors all over the nation. Without any further delay, may I please invite Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, President, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry and MD, Apollo Hospitals. Ma'am, I request you to please deliver the welcome address. Over to you.
Namaskar and good morning. Respected Arjun Munda ji, Honorable Minister for Tribal Affairs, Dr. Jayanti S. Ravi, Dr. Naval Kapoor, Srimati Vinita Srivastav, and Manvi, who I think holds a very special place in this conference, expert speakers, eminent dignitaries from other countries, doctors, healthcare officials, patients, survivors, and patient advocates. It is an honor to be here today, gathered to note and to mark the National Sickle Cell Conclave on the event of Sickle Cell Day 2020, the 19th of June. FICCI has been undertaking various endeavors to accelerate the health and the economic development of the country with a special focus on marginalized sections of Indian society, including the scheduled tribes, through necessary industry interventions, market linkages, and specific activities towards building their sustainable livelihood. It's equally important for us to take special initiatives towards ensuring their health standards. Hence, it gives me pleasure to welcome all of you to the National Sickle Cell Conclave, being organized by FICCI to mark the World Sickle Cell Day, along with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, the Government of India. I'm also thankful and very happy to welcome the Novartis India Global Alliance for Sickle Cell Disease organization for supporting this kind of initiative. World Sickle Cell Day is a United Nations recognized day to raise the awareness of sickle cell at a national and international level. The United Nations General Assembly recognized sickle cell as a public health problem and one of the world's foremost genetic disease. WHO in May 2006, at its 59th World Health Assembly, adopted the resolution for sickle cell disease. The resolution calls for members to raise awareness of sickle cell on June 19th of each year at a national and an international level. Sickle cell disease is an inherited disorder and it is a major health burden in our country and in many parts of the world. The estimated number of known individuals suffering from sickle cell is about 3 lakhs, but it's also thought that a more comprehensive surveillance would report this figure at closer to 13 lakh, which is 1,300,000 people in the country, making it possibly among the highest prevalence in the world. Particular states have an especially high incidence of this disease, like Gujarat, Jharkhand, Bihar, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra, Assam, Meghalaya, Arunachal. And while it's most common in tribal groups, sickle cell disease is increasingly found throughout the country because of the migration across cities. It predominantly affects disadvantaged communities, and it's a significant public health problem that also unfortunately has a social stigma. And there's a disadvantage because of lost opportunity in schooling, education, and employment. It is important for these children to have access to good medical care, to be able to have the frequent blood transfusion and also effective management of the disease. And that's why I'm especially happy to have Manvi as our compeer for today, because being a survivor, she's a role model to say that if we handle this, we have proactive, productive, vibrant members of society despite suffering from the disease. It also gives us a motivation to enhance the science, research, and discovery towards finding cures and finding better methodologies to handle this disorder. We understand that the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and I welcome the number of participants from the ministry here, they have been working to conduct awareness programs, screening, counseling sessions for management of the disease, and also to build a comprehensive policy and a framework to tackle sickle cell. And this may be coming out shortly from the National Health Mission. I also especially acknowledge the presence of many senior members from the Health Ministry and commit on behalf of FICCI our continued support in any way required towards this disease and our empathy towards those who have it and the commitment of our members in the healthcare sector towards handling this disorder. The Prime Minister had also spoken about sickle cell disease during his Mann Ki Baat and shown interest in the treatment during his visit to Japan in 2014. I think it would be a good idea for us to develop and present to the Honorable Prime Minister a framework towards enhanced treatment access as well as enhanced research. There is no national level forum to deliberate on this issue and to enable facilitation of access to treatment. So I think it's an important aspect for experts who are gathered here today, and I thank you all for your time. I would especially like to note the presence of the Honorable Minister, who has shown a very proactive support towards sickle cell anemia. And in this context, the webinar which is being organized speaks about the increasing awareness in the community, the global burden of disease and its prevalence, and discussions will be held on the status, the management, the global and areas for improvement. I once again thank all of you. I welcome you to this conclave and assure you of FICCI's highest commitment and cooperation. All the very best. We are also in the middle of a major pandemic, so stay safe, take care of yourselves, and remain positive. Jai Hind. Namaste.
Thank you so much for your words. Moving forward, I would like to introduce Mr. Alan Lovell from the Economist Intelligence Unit, London, to give a brief presentation on the Economist report on sickle cell disease in India. Over to you, Mr. Allen.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I have some slides. Can we see the slides on the screen? Great, thank you very much. So, I am a senior associate at the Economist Intelligence Healthcare Unit. We are the research arm of the Economist Group. And I'm very pleased to be talking about our new report, which is being launched, of course, today, called Stepping Out of the Shadows, Combating Sickle Cell Disease in India. We had an interesting journey doing this report. We originally set out to do something that was a very quantitative-based study, so trying to estimate the financial burden of the disease in India. But early on, we discovered two things. One was that the data quality around sickle cell disease in India is very poor and often very patchy. And so we had the issue of garbage in, garbage out, as they say, about building models. So however good the model might be, if you don't have reliable data to begin with, then you can't be confident in any of the results. The second thing was, as has already been touched on by in this program, was that there's a story here to be told that cannot just be captured in numbers, and that was a story around people suffering from the disease who are often least able to access good quality care. And so our report, whilst it does speak about numbers, it also tries to focus in on the story of patients and the policy actions that can be taken to improve their lives. Next slide, please. So in my presentation, there's 4 areas I wish to talk through. A brief introduction, then I wish to speak a little bit about burden of a disease, policy, and then looking to the future, we've set out what we've called a roadmap to success. Next slide, please. So my first part of the introduction is really to say a big thank you. I've got a long list here of 15 people. Some of them sat on our expert panel. Some of them underwent in-depth interviews, and some of them both sat on a panel and were interviewed as well. Alongside this primary research, we also did a lot of secondary research, including a structured literature review and also modeling where we could. But again, I'd like to say a big thank you to the people here without whom we couldn't have created this report. Next slide, please. Here are some pictures. Everybody likes a few photos of the expert panel, which happened last year, which was an enormously interesting and useful day, and that really set the direction of the research, including this sort of switch of emphasis away from purely quantitative towards a more narrative style of report. Next slide, please. Finally, again, lots of thank yous here. We, unfortunately not me, but a colleague of mine was able to visit the Sickle Cell Institute in Raipur, and that was incredibly illuminating. And again, a big thank you to the staff and the patients who spoke to us there. Next slide, please. So on to burden, and I'd want to talk about burden in 3 ways. One is to talk about epidemiology, one is to talk about financial burden, and one is to talk about burden in terms of individual quality of life. So we've already had some numbers around the epidemiology, some estimates, and they are all estimates. So as we know, broadly speaking, the disease is like a belt across India from southeastern Gujarat to southwestern Odisha. I've got here over 1 million people have sickle cell disease in India today, and we think about 200,000 people are born with the condition every year. But these are estimates, and the numbers in the map there came from the Global Burden of Disease, which is a very fine project based in Seattle in Washington, in the US, and in Washington State, I should say, in the US. And they take the best available data, and then they use statistical techniques to extrapolate from that estimates of incidence prevalence for a range of different diseases. And if, as I said at the beginning, if you have low quality data to begin with, then the estimates are going to be have big error bars. And so we know of many studies, and we speak about them in our report, that have within these different states have run incidence and prevalence studies, and sometimes found quite different numbers, and sometimes quite a lot larger numbers. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but we do know that it's not a trivial number of people with sickle cell disease in India today. Next slide, please. So the second way of looking at burden is to think about the financial burden. And here, again, we've split this up into 2. We talk about, in the report, we talk about direct costs and indirect costs. So direct costs are those that are met by the healthcare system. And again, lots of poor and patchy data, but we know from similar blood disorders that the cost to the healthcare system is going to be at least around about 3,000 rupees per child. But when you start talking about blood transfusions, which are quite common, and some of the other common treatments, you're into around about 200,000 rupees per child. And these are estimates from some years ago. So and there are going to be many, many more additional costs not captured here, including outpatient appointments, emergency visits, hospitalization. So again, we don't really know what the costs are to the healthcare system, but again, they are not small. Next slide, please. Then there are indirect costs, and these are costs which are not felt by the healthcare system, but by families, individuals, and by the wider society. And we use two ways to estimate those. The first one is the loss to the economy because of people having to lose work and or miss work because they are having to look after their children. And we estimate that's around about 3,500 crores per year. And you can also estimate it by, the loss of the people to the future workforce. So something in sickle cell disease is high childhood mortality, and you are in effect losing that person in the future workforce. And so that came to about 1,000 crores per year. So again, large numbers, not as large as some of the more prevalent and obviously some of the NCD diseases, but certainly not insignificant numbers. Next slide, please. And then the third way in terms of burden is just to that story I said right at the outset, the impact on people's lives. And again, this has already been touched on, and really it's just to repeat and agree with what's already been said. Increased child mortality is a terrible, terrible burden, of course. Vaso-occlusive crises and pain. So this is when sickled cells block the movement of blood in the body and can cause immense pain and fatigue. Anemia and organ damage can result. You're also at a higher risk of stroke. Sepsis, other complications, and also complications in pregnancy. And then on the blue shaded side there, we've also got the impact on, as was said in our very first introduction, on people's dreams. So that notion of a loss of work or not being able to get work, this can then lock you into a cycle of poverty. Social stigma is still commonplace, not only from society, but also from healthcare professionals. Sometimes people are seen as malingerers in some way, and also education curtailment. Many children cannot finish their education, and again, then cycles back into poverty. Next slide, please. And also, and I touched on this, here are 4 quotes. We have more in the report. If you are able to go and read it, please do. But as I mentioned, oftentimes when these people with sickle cell disease do find themselves at a district hospital or primary care, they often do not get the quality of care or indeed the compassion that they should be getting. And there are some quotes in the report that that give some insight into that experience. Next slide, please. So what are some of the major challenges from the policy side? I've got 4 here, which I'll briefly go through. The first one is poor access to treatment and late diagnosis, particularly in remote and tribal areas. As we know, there's high incidence in those areas, although it's not only in those areas that sickle cell disease is found. And it's not uncommon for people by the time they do get diagnosis to have been suffering with a condition, sometimes for many years. Secondly, when people do find their way to, for example, a district hospital or other healthcare centre, there's frequently not enough suitably trained staff, and equipment may be broken or simply missing altogether. There's a sense of stigma, as I've touched on, and a sense of resignation amongst many patients, which leads to less effective screening programs. So people might not bother to turn up or might not bother for follow-up because there's a sense of what can be done. And sometimes that's fed in by those first 2 issues if they've had those interactions with healthcare systems. And then finally, there's a general neglect and funding restraints at the policy level, which again really just encapsulates and makes those first 3 challenges just more and more of an issue. Policy implementation, as we know, is delayed, and there's a lack of dedicated funding. Next slide, please. But I realize it's been all doom and gloom so far, but there is good work happening, particularly at the state level. I realize this is a very small figure. I'm not going to go through it here, but it's in the report. But there's interesting and very helpful screening programs happening. There's innovative funding partnerships. There's provider collaboration. And whilst you can't always pick up a regional initiative and simply move it to another place. You can at least learn from one another, and it can give ideas for nationwide initiatives as well. So I'm really pleased to be part of this event today, which can start and continue that conversation. Next slide, please. So then I mentioned about this roadmap to success. So a number of principles emerge out of our research, which we use to put together what we've called a roadmap, which describes a series of building blocks around which we think an effective policy program can be built. And by following this, we believe that it could help India to better understand the burden of sickle cell disease, to reduce its incidence, to improve outcomes and improve the quality of life for people with disease. And so it's really three domains that we describe in the report. The first one is to recognize sickle cell disease as a priority. And in that includes tackling stigma, it includes improving data collection and expanding screening programs. And those three support one another. If you can tackle stigma and raise awareness, that will make screening programs more effective, which will in turn lead to improved data collection. Secondly, it's about strengthening implementation at national and state level. I've already mentioned that there's a lot of very positive work going on. But arguably the most important thing right now is to actually finalize and implement 2018 draft hemoglobinopathies policy, and that will really give us what it's a priority at the national level. There's also the need to invest in local infrastructure. So this idea of allowing people to get care close to them, not having to travel so far. So that means improving primary care, district hospitals, but also strengthen centres of excellence. And these should really be retained for those most difficult, most challenging cases for research and also coordinating work or at the primary level. And then finally, it's around adopting innovative technologies and processes. And it's really pleasing to be able to say that finally there are some innovations, there is some disruption happening in the world of sickle cell disease. So this is about working with local as well as global innovators, embracing disruption because it's coming and it needs to come, quite frankly, and to recognize that the treatment and diagnosis landscape is changing. Next slide, please. So then my final slide is just briefly to talk about that changing landscape. And so there are three areas here we touched on in the report. One is screening, which is already happening across the country, but really expanding that out. Also, you can do screening programs at different times of people's lives, and they all complement one another in different ways. And so as part of that, improving that effectiveness is to improve awareness and reduce stigma. So screening programs are helpful. They can be more helpful still. Secondly, public-private partnerships. Again, these are already happening in some places, but we would recommend that they be supported further. Also look to international best practice. There's some really interesting stuff going on, Ghana, for example, and other places. And again, this can help reduce incidence and improve quality of life. And then finally, technological innovation. There are a series of new medicines being developed out there, new diagnostics, point of care tools, and in many ways it's a very exciting time if you are working in treatment for sickle cell disease, because it's been a long time coming, but finally there's some hope that improvement can be found for people with sickle cell disease. So last slide, please. Next slide, please. So that's my brief rundown. I hope I didn't go over time too much, but again, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. I really look forward to seeing how this program continues today and beyond. And I'll hand back to the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Allen. Now may I please invite Honorable Minister for Tribal Affairs, Government of India, Shri Arjun Munda ji, to release the Economist report on sickle cell disease in India. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to request you to please portal as well.
You need to get audio from that side.
This is the Sickle Cell Portal developed by Ministry of Tribal Affairs and Piramal Foundation and the help of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you so much. May I also please request keynote address on World Sickle Cell Day?
Sir, sorry to interrupt you, sir. Sir, voice clear नहीं है. So can you just clear to the mic?
Now you listening? अभी सुन रहे हैं?
वंडरफुल सर, बहुत बढ़िया।
बहुत अच्छा आ रहा है सर।
तो मैं इस बात का जिक्र कर रहा था कि जो प्रेजेंटेशन के माध्यम से हम सबने देखा है और मैडम डॉक्टर रेड्डी ने भी सारी बातों को कहा है, मैं उस बातों को जिक्र नहीं करते हुए एक चुनौती और जिसके बारे में मैं कुछ दिन पहले अपने मंत्रालय में चर्चा करते हुए अपने पदाधिकारियों को कहा था कि इसे हमें चुनौती के रूप में लेते हुए कैसे हम सबको सफलता के लिए आगे बढ़ना है, इस कार्यक्रम के निमित्त हमें सुनिश्चित करना चाहिए। और मुझे खुशी है इस बात की कि आज ट्राइबल अफेयर्स और पिरामल फाउंडेशन के तरफ से एक पोर्टल भी लॉन्च किया गया और इसके माध्यम से मैं समझता हूं कि कुछ इस कार्यक्रम को और गति मिलेगी। जनजातीय कार्य मंत्रालय ने समस्या की गंभीरता को समझा है और इस समस्या के सार्थक हल के लिए हम लगातार महत्वपूर्ण निर्णय लेने का काम जारी रखेंगे। राज्यों को आईसीएमआर के सहयोग से जनजातीय छात्रों की स्क्रीनिंग के लिए राशि उपलब्ध कराई गई है। जैव प्रौद्योगिकी विभाग के सहयोग से राज्यों में कार्यशालाएं आयोजित की गई है। विभिन्न राज्यों द्वारा दर्शाए गए आंकड़ों के अनुसार लगभग 1,13,00,000 लोगों की स्क्रीनिंग में लगभग 8.75% यानी 9,96,368 व्यक्तियों में यह व्याधि परिलक्षित हुई है, जिसके लक्षण लगभग 9,49,057 और 43,311 लोगों में पाए गए हैं। इसके अलावा रोग का इलाज खोजने के लिए जैव प्रौद्योगिकी विभाग अनुसंधान कर रही है। बीमारी के प्रसार को नियंत्रित करने के उद्देश्य से राज्यों को सिकल सेल प्रबंधन हेतु प्रोटोकॉल जारी किए गए हैं। राज्यों को सलाह दी गई है कि वो अगली पीढ़ी तक इस बीमारी के प्रसार को नियंत्रित करने के लिए माता पिता को उचित परामर्श देने के अभियान को लगातार चलाएं ताकि अपने एसीए से ग्रसित बच्चों की शादी किसी दूसरे एसीए से ग्रसित बच्चों से ना करें। वित्तीय वर्ष में मंत्रालय ने एक एक्शन रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट की मंजूरी दी है, जिसके अंतर्गत योग आधारित जीवन शैली के माध्यम से रोगी में इस बीमारी से उत्पन्न जटिलताओं को कम करने की प्रभावकारिता को समझने का प्रयास किया जाएगा। एसीए स्क्रीनिंग सहित सिकल सेल एनीमिया से निपटने के लिए कुल मिलाकर अब तक लगभग 60 करोड़ से अधिक मांग आधारित अनुदानों को राज्यों के लिए जारी किया गया है। भविष्य में भी कोई राज्य एसीए के प्रबंधन के लिए अनुदान की मांग करती है और मेरी मंत्रालय ऐसे प्रस्तावों पर लगातार समर्थन करते रहेगी। मेरे मंत्रालय द्वारा सिकल सेल, जिसका मैंने कहा कि एक पोर्टल का अनावरण आज जो किया गया है, इस पोर्टल को और सुव्यवस्थित कैसे किया जाए, इसमें आप सबके सुझाव आमंत्रित है। आप उत्कृष्ट संसाधनों से और संस्थानों से जुड़े हुए हैं और आपके सुझाव के साथ आगे के कार्यक्रमों के साथ मिलकर, जब फिक्की के लोग मुझसे मिलने के लिए आए थे तो इस बात की चर्चा भी हुई थी कि आगे फिक्की के साथ मिलकर के और बेहतर ढंग से बड़े कार्य योजना के साथ हम कैसे इस कार्यक्रम को गति देंगे। जैसे आप सब ने सुना और मैं कई बार माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी से बातचीत करता हूं और बातचीत करने के क्रम में इस विषय पर जब चर्चा होती है तो वो काफ़ी संवेदनशील दिखते हैं। और जैसे डॉक्टर मैडम रेड्डी ने बताया भी कि जापान विजिट के दौरान उन्होंने किस तरीके से इस विषय की चर्चा की, इसकी गंभीरता की चर्चा की और कई फोरम पर उन्होंने इस बात की चर्चा की और इसे इस देश में हम अच्छे ढंग से एड्रेस करना चाहते हैं, इस समस्या का समाधान ढूंढना चाहते हैं। और मुझे पूरी आशा है कि जनजातीय समुदायों में जागरूकता पैदा करने की दिशा में जो आने वाले दिनों में इसके माध्यम से पहल होगी और एक मंच प्रदान करने में हम सफल होंगे। पोर्टल के माध्यम से सहायक दस्तावेजों सहित SCD या ट्रीट्स के साथ साथ वास्तविक समय डैशबोर्ड के माध्यम से पंजीकरण का प्रावधान होगा। बीमारी के संबंध में वीडियो के साथ साथ देश भर में होने वाली घटनाओं को समुदाय और लिंगवार जानकारी भी उपलब्ध होगी। मेरा मानना है कि आज के इस सत्र में विचार विमर्श से बीमारी से जुड़ी हुई सामाजिक समस्या जो सोशल स्टिग्मा है उसे कम करने के अलावे समस्या के समाधान के लिए एक बेहतर प्रबंधन में सक्षम होने के लिए अनुकूल और कार्यप्रक समाधान निकलेंगे। मंत्रालय जमीनी स्तर पर सुधार लाने के लिए वह सभी उपाय करेगा जो फिक्की राष्ट्रीय एवं अंतर्राष्ट्रीय विशेषज्ञों और राज्य सरकारों के साथ निरंतर बातचीत के माध्यम से आवश्यक है कि ताकि सुनिश्चित किया जा सके कि अगले वर्ष हम फिर मिले तो इस समस्या से निपटने में सभी हितधारकों द्वारा सराहनीय प्रगति दिखाई दे। अभी हमने समस्या को जाना है और जिस तरीके से हमें पिछले कई वर्षों में तुलनात्मक ढंग से प्रगति होना चाहिए, जाने अनजाने हम उस विषय को सही तरीके से एड्रेस नहीं कर पाए या समझ नहीं पाए या लोगों को जोड़ नहीं पाए, और जो इससे ग्रसित है बड़ी संख्या जो रूरल इंडिया में रहते हैं, जो कई बार ऐसा लगता है कि इस तरह की समस्याओं से वो बिल्कुल अछूता है इस मामले में जानकारी के अभाव में कि इस तरह की भी डिजीज होती है। वास्तविक रूप से जब देहातों में, गांव में ऐसे लोग जिसके बॉडी में हेमोग्लोबिन की कमी होती है तो ऐसा मान करके चलते हैं कि किसी अदृश्य ताकत ने उन्हें निचोड़ दिया है, उनको नुकसान पहुंचा रहा है और वो पूजा पाठ में व्यस्त हो जाते हैं। इसे जागरूकता के माध्यम से हम आगे बढ़ाने का काम को सफल कर सकते हैं। अब धीरे धीरे जैसे इस समय वैश्विक महामारी से पूरा देश संवेदनशील है, चिंतित है और सतर्क है। गांव में जो सतर्कता देखी जा रही है इस कोरोना वायरस के कारण, वैश्विक महामारी के कारण, तो इस तरह के जागरूक इस डिजीज में भी होना चाहिए कि ये जो डिजीज आज रूरल एरिया में, ट्राइबल एरिया में या अब बहुत सारे ऐसे एरिया में भी जो अर्बन एरिया में माइग्रेंट हो रहे हैं वहाँ पर भी बढ़ने की संख्या हो रही है। और जैसे हमने डेटा के माध्यम से देखा कि इसमें किस तरीके से पूरे लाइफ साइकिल को डिस्टर्ब करता है कि हर चीज में उन्हें जूझना पड़ता है, संघर्ष करना पड़ता है और उससे देश के अर्थव्यवस्था को भी बहुत दबाव पड़ता है। तो इस दृष्टि से एक बहुत चैलेंजिंग कार्य को हम सब ने मिलकर के लिया है और इस वेबिनार के माध्यम से जितने भी विशेषज्ञ हैं उनके अच्छे सुझाव, और मैं धन्यवाद दूंगा फिक्की के हमारे प्रेसिडेंट को, डॉक्टर संगीता रेड्डी जी को, फिक्की के सभी मेंबर्स को और इस सेमिनार में जो भी उपलब्ध हैं हमारे पदाधिकारियों को। और मैं ये कहूँगा चूँकि आज सभी हेल्थ सेक्रेटरी इस वेबिनार में जुड़े हुए हैं, तो अपने अपने राज्यों में आप हेल्थ मिनिस्ट्री के माध्यम से या आपको जब भी लगे ट्राइबल मिनिस्ट्री के माध्यम से इसे सही तरीके से अपने राज्य में डेटाबेस बनाने के लिए, इसकी स्क्रीनिंग करने के लिए और फर्दर मेडिकेशन के लिए जो इफेक्टेड है उनके लिए मेडिकेशन की सुविधा कैसे हम डोर टू डोर ये करते हुए, टारगेट करते हुए उन्हें अच्छे ढंग से पहुंचा सके और आने वाले जनरेशन को हम फ्रेश जनरेशन के रूप में कैसे ला सकें, ये हमारे बीच में कमिटमेंट के साथ काम करने की आवश्यकता है। और मैं समझता हूँ कि इस समय मैंने आयोजकों से कहा था कि थोड़ी आज अचानक व्यस्तता हो गई थोड़ा भी, क्योंकि आज पूरे देश में राज्यसभा का वोटिंग हो रहा है, तो हमारे यहाँ पे भी इस तरह की व्यस्तता है, पर मेरी शुभकामना है और मैं इसके पूरे डिस्कशन के जो निष्कर्ष आएंगे, जो आप डिस्कशन करने के बाद उसको मैं पर्सनली फिर से बैठ करके देखूंगा और मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि कभी ऐसे मौका मिले जब जिस प्रदेश में आप हैं और जब हमारा विजिट हो तो हम आपसे मिल करके फिर बात करेंगे। इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैं इस सिकल सेल देश पर आप सबको इस कार्यक्रम के लिए बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। आप सबको धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister Shri Arjun Munda ji, for your precious time. It is indeed a privilege for us that you joined us in this National Sickle Cell Conclave. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Francis Bouchard, Head of EGM Oncology, Novartis. Mr. Francis, I request you to please deliver the special address. Over to you, sir.
Namaste and good morning. It's a great pleasure for me and today to participate in this first India National Sickle Cell Conclave. So my name is Francis Bouchard. I'm the head of the Emerging Growth Markets region at Novartis Oncology, and I'm participating today from Basel, Switzerland. I've actually had the opportunity in my current role, but also in a previous role when I was based in Singapore, to travel to India on many occasions in the last 10 years. And I've always been very impressed by the energy, the kindness, the hospitality of the people in India. My last trip was actually scheduled in March and unfortunately canceled due to COVID. We managed to have a very productive virtual interaction with the team. And I'm really looking forward to my next visit once we've managed to get rid of the pandemic. Now, before I start my short address today, I would like to play a message from our CEO, Vas Narasimhan. Can we play the video, please? So yeah, we had a few technical issues with the video, but I hope that you really got a sense that for us as an organization, the focus on sickle cell disease really starts from the top, and Vas is also personally involved. I'd now like to say just a few words about our presence, the presence of Novartis in India. We've had a long-standing presence that goes back to 1947, so this is more than 60 years. And we've continually invested in India, and today we employ around 8,000 people. They're mainly in Hyderabad, where we have a world-class business service center. And we also have quite a few associates in Mumbai, which is our head office. And it's important to highlight that out of these 8,000 people, roughly a quarter, 25% of our associates are working on developing medicines. Now, access is also a very important part of what we stand for. And we're very proud of some of our initiatives that we have in India. We deliver healthcare sustainably for those in rural India with our Arogya Parivar initiative, which operates in 15 states across the country, covers more than 15,000 villages that are home to more than 32 million people. So quite a sustainable impact. And in addition, we work very closely with state governments on public health, including early detection and diagnosis, to try to enhance medical capabilities and also raise patient awareness. And collaboration is one of the key principles that we stand by, and we recognize that it's only by working together that we can really improve the outcomes for patients and change the practice of medicine. And that's why we're really pleased to be associated with today's event. Now, just a few words on sickle cell disease, and it's been well described by some of the earlier speakers. We've heard that it's an inherited blood disorder, which impacts over 1 million or 13 lakh patients in India, which means that India is one of the countries with the highest number of patients with sickle cell disease in the world. And in my region, it's the most impacted country with Saudi Arabia. Those are the two key countries. It also negatively impacts the patient's lives, including emotional and physical well-being, relationships, education, their ability to work and fully contribute to society. We've heard this from Alan Lovell earlier when he shared some of the key learnings from the Economist report. And it's obviously extremely debilitating. You've got unpredictable, painful events that are very difficult to predict that lead to frequent hospitalizations and affect every part of the body, and unfortunately leads to early mortality. Now, surprisingly, despite all of this, it's one of the oldest genetic diseases in the world, but there's still not been any advancement in therapy for the last 40 years. And that's where I think we come in as a leading research-based pharmaceutical company with a strong commitment to innovation and patients. And amongst our varied areas of research, Novartis has been very active in the area of hematology, namely in CML, chronic myeloid leukemia, but also in thalassemia. And those are two diseases where we've had a profound impact on significantly extending patients' lives. So it's quite natural now for us to be pursuing a comprehensive approach to also tackle sickle cell disease. Now, on the medication front, we've developed therapies that reduce the frequency of pain crisis, but we're not stopping there. We're also exploring different mechanisms to target pathways that are involved in the disease, and that includes small molecules, but also gene editing. And in India specifically, we're conducting a number of clinical trials and scientific studies, which produce data that will help healthcare decision-making and also enable early access to these innovative therapies. And we're also working on solutions to expand people's access to treatment. That's something that's particularly important in the countries that are part of the region that I'm leading. And I gave you the example of Arogya Parivar earlier. We also support the ongoing efforts of the Indian government towards sickle cell disease, and in particular when it comes to trying to elevate disease awareness, because this is an area where there continues to be a huge need. Now, despite all of our efforts, we humbly recognize that we can't do it alone. And this is where the importance of collaboration comes in. So through the power of collaboration, and today's cross-stakeholder meeting, I think, is a great example of this. We hope to continue to reimagine medicine for individuals that are living with sickle cell disease. So in conclusion, as researchers, colleagues, family members, and sometimes patients ourselves, we understand the profound impact that sickle cell disease can have. And our associates are passionate about what we do to try to extend people's lives. I'm really honored to participate today on behalf of Novartis to better understand the impact of sickle cell disease in India and to work together on progressing this important work. I'm particularly impressed by the organization of this important meeting, which coincides with World Sickle Cell Disease Day. And I'm hopeful that this will help pave the way for better outcomes and a better quality of life for everyone living with sickle cell disease in India. They're all counting on us. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Mr. Now may I please invite Srimati Vinita Shrivastava, National Senior Consultant, Blood Cell NHM, Ministry for Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, to provide us an overview of sickle cell disease in India. Over to you, ma'am.
Learning to me as well while I was listening to Mr. Ellen, Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, Honorable Minister. So this was a good learning to me, and I would like to start with my slides. Chetan, can you do that? So next, please. So hemoglobinopathies, as we understand, are inherited blood disorders, and they impose a very heavy burden on families and health sector in India, an important cause of morbidity and mortality. India has the largest number of children with thalassemia in the world, and about 1 to 1.5 lakhs, and about 42 million carriers of beta thalassemia. Next, please. Sickle cell disease affect tribal groups as well as some other communities in certain states such as central, western, and southern part of India. I mean, when we will be listening to other speakers, we'll come to know how good Ellen has already said about that in Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, in Odisha, and in other states also it has been initiated. But now, if you see, it is around in 29 states we have started with the hemoglobinopathies program. Candidate frequencies from 1 to 35, and there's a huge number of people with sickle cell disease. In some communities, it is to be found to 40 to 50%. In Nilgiri Hills in Tamil Nadu, has to be found to 40 to 50%. We also talk about the other variant hemoglobins, that is HB, which is very common in northeastern states and has a carrier frequency of 50% in some areas. It is found that lower frequency in eastern states of West Bengal, Bihar, and Uttar Pradesh, while HBT is present in 2% of the population in Punjab. So we have a much of the blood disorders problem in India. So what is the WHO goal and what India thinks? I will just try to elaborate that. The World Health Organization has clearly outlined the goals for control of hemoglobinopathies. It is to provide affordable and adequate therapy for those affected, which is very important for us because we have much of the patients, while at the same time reduce the number of births of children with the disease through strong political, administrative, and financial support. And this has been initiated actually. What the World Health Assembly also talked about that to develop and implement a reinforced, comprehensive national integrated program for prevention and management of hemoglobinopathies, and the member state, India was one of them, was also urged to develop and strengthen medical genetic services and community education and training. My previous speakers are talking about the community education. This is very important. In India, technology and know-how was there, and for last 20 years, I can say that it was not very focused intervention, but now we have already initiated with, we also did a cost analysis of the same, how the money, if we do the prevention and we see the management, so the prevention part is more effective rather taking the management part. Management is too costly, and we understand that true here in India. The existing studies in the countries like Italy, Canada, Cyprus, even in Pakistan was taken into consideration while developing our own guidelines. The mainstay of treatment was found to be repeated blood transfusion, followed by regular iron chelation therapy to remove the excess iron overload, consequent to multiple blood transfusion. The transfusion dependent order plays a lot of great health burden in healthcare. So if you see one of the studies recently done by Dr. Roshan Kola and Dr. Tulika said, it says that in another 10 years, if you see the requirement of blood transfusion, it will go up to at least 4 million. So it will be too high. In 2015, in India, under the dynamic leadership of our Honorable Minister and some of our great experts and senior officials, the project took the flight, and 2016 we came up with the guidelines for prevention and management of hemoglobinopathies and other variants. So we understand in health policy also it has been recognized that government recognizes that within the country that exists the diversity of cultures and opinions about number of issues relevant to genetics, such as human reproduction issues, as well as about the significance of the disability. So this was kept in mind while we were drafting our health policies. Now the vision under NHM is to provide optimal treatment to those affected and prevent the birth of further children with disease through carrier screening, genetic counseling and prenatal diagnosis. So this is very important when we talk about prevention. The previous slide, please. The new initiative and vision under the National Health Movement provides a golden opportunity to administer adequate therapy for those affected, to make them live a better life and preventing birth of children affected with hemoglobinopathies through carrier screening, genetic counseling and prenatal diagnosis, which has been started in these states. Next, please. Mission is to provide a better future to all thalassemia and sickle cell disease patients and their families. So we also talk about the rehabilitation part, which is very important, and we are doing a convergence with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs to come up with these expectations. Next, please. We understand the guiding elements. We all understand that it is a genetic disorder and how it is being taken care of. Some are the carriers, some have the disease state. So as sir said that there are 9,49,000 people who were found to be carrier state. How many are to be the disease state? Still it is a problem because we don't have an exact survey on that. Next, please. The disease state occurs when an individual both genes are abnormal, one abnormal gene being inherited from each of the parents. So this is very important when people understand how the mutation is being done. This is very important, and this we are trying to do with the genetic counseling of and with the community education. Next, please. Prevention, as we understand, it is a time between the initiation and implementation. The visibility of impact is by the group is chosen for the carrier of adolescent, premarital, preconception and antenatal. And success of preventive program for long periods is very important. We can't get the impact of this prevention program immediately. So it is a time taking, and expected outcomes are going to take decades for this. So now we have started just 4 years back with the screening and giving the educate therapy. It will still take time for another 5 years to come up with the expected outcomes. Next, please. So what is the guidelines of prevention? These are based on the right of prospective parents, which is very important. I have previously in my slide, I have talked about the health policy. It says that the parents of risk of having a child with serious genetic disorder, but their rights are equally important. Their stigma, their rights, that has to be kept in mind when we are talking about all these aspects. So community education awareness program to remove the myths regarding transmission of disease, gender biasness, stigma related to disease, carrier states, informing the community about the appropriate prevention options and their availability through public health facilities. This is very important for us, and we are trying to focus on this in all these states of India, and the support is being provided. Training of healthcare personnel for delivery of genetic counseling. So genetic counseling is very important. We don't have several separate modules for that. Now we have come up with the modules which has a special component for genetic counseling, because this is very important. While we are talking about awareness in communities, it is equally important that we do a genetic counseling for all these things. Reading the laboratories, which is again a very important when we are talking about this screening. The good laboratory services are very important to us. So this is very important that we have a good laboratory services in each and every district, and we have tried to have these things like CBC machines are being kept, HPLC and electrophysics are being established at the district level. Establish carrier screening. So now this is very important, that how many are the carriers and how many are the disease. So we take proper care of them. For carrier people, we do a proper counseling and the prevention part, and for the disease patient, we have to really take them to they lead a normal life. Next, please. So what else is being done is we are establishing a regional center states with facilities for prenatal diagnosis. So a woman who is being supposed to be positive for SCD, so they have to go for the DNA analysis also. And recently in Chhattisgarh also, and in other states, we have started with these procedures. So the previous samplings has been done and the DNA analysis has also been done. Newborn screening with the RBS Kids programs, we have initiated that, and we have found so many children, especially in the tribal areas, not even in tribal, even in Uttar Pradesh, where we have, it's a big state, but in Uttar Pradesh state like Uttar Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, we have found patients to be suffering from this disease, sickle cell disease. Then installation of sustainable and cost-effective screening program at the school level was also a big challenge, where we, with the RBSK team, we have started with the adolescent screening backed by the effective pre-screening educative program. So before the screening, we give the education programs, and then we go for screening, because the myths and stigma has to be removed first, and then we go for the screening of these adolescents. Next, please. Establishing services at the community level for prenatal and preconception. Again, a big challenge for us, even at the PSC, what Honorable Minister was talking, that we have so much of problems in the rural areas. So where we have a PSC, CSC, the people who are coming to the facilities need to be counseled in a manner before marriage also, and before the conception of with the good genetic counseling, that they have to think, if they have a previous history, they have to go for all these screening parts. Extended family screening for all known and dedicated careers of the patients, because those who are known to us, those who are registered with us, their families are being screened. So extended family screening is also again a big challenge to it, and which we have started in at least 9 states with the extended family screening. Implementations of the strategies. So this is not a separate program we are talking. It's a hemoglobinopathies, where we talk about thalassemia, sickle, and other variant hemoglobinopathies. And here, what we have said, that it has to be achieved through public health goals. Whatever is there, with whatever is existing, we have a very good health systems. So with that health system, how we can establish these system also has been taken into account, and we are trying to have that. We should in accordance to WHO report, what it talks about the genetic disorder and birth defects. We have also asked these states to take up these reports and emphasize on them doing the implementation plan at the state level. While emphasizing there, we have also said that preserving and respecting the social and cultural diversity is very important. The dignity and right of the affected and voluntary genetic counseling after the informed consent. I'm emphasizing on them because this is very important in our country like India, where the cultural diversity is so much high. We need to respect the rights of the patients and their parents also. This is very important for us. Next, please. So when we talk about the guidelines of the affected patients that have right to access to care, provide optimal care to patients for thalassemia and sickle disease, ensuring availability of safe blood with children suffering from thalassemia and sickle cell, with the component separation, with the leukodepletion bags, and the blood banks where we don't have none, and the blood storage center where we are going to put the components. Provide financial support for obtaining medication for iron chelation, which has also been helped from the GOI. It has been proposed in the PIPs, and through PIPs we support the states for all these medications and the blood transfusion part. Next, please. Training of doctors, establishing more hematopoietic stem cell transplant centers in each and every state, which is very important. Inform the community that appropriate treatment and management options are made in the public health facilities. This is also important, that these public health facilities are having all the systems, establishing the ICHS centers, which is very important. So these centers are already been established in the state where people can go and avail the facilities. Next, please. Achieving maximum convergence with the health programs of cost effectiveness like RBSK, RCH, antenatal screening, adolescent program, and IC. Screening and surveys, which were earlier my speakers had already talked about. A system of surveillance is very important, which we are focusing and trying to establish to evaluate outcomes. And convergence with the other ministries like Ministry of Tribal Affairs and Ministry of Social Justice to get the better outcomes. Next, please. Next, please. So political advocacy is very important, which has been already taken up. Our Honorable Minister for Tribal Affairs, our Honorable Minister of Health and Family Welfare, everybody is together to come up with the, to fight with the cause of SCD. Next, please. So the budget, you can understand the budgetary support is from state and central government to facilitate prevention and treatment of patients with the thalassemia and sickle cell disease. Involvement of stakeholders, my previous speakers has also talked about that it is important that non-government organizations, community-based organizations, support groups, corporates, private sector are being involved in the prevention and the management program. Next, please. And thank you. Together we can achieve much of the goals. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vinita ma'am, for your insights. Dr. Jayanti Ravi, Principal Secretary of Health, Gujarat, was supposed to join us, but due to some last-minute urgencies, she is unable to join us. So on our request, Dr. Umang Mishra, State Program Officer, Sickle Cell Anemia, Government of Gujarat, will be speaking in place of her. Thank you, sir, for accepting our request. I would like to invite you to deliver the special address. Over to you, sir.
Sorry, sir, your voice is not coming.
We cannot hear you, Dr. Mishra. You're still not audible.
I think there are some issues. Meanwhile, Dr. Nitin Madan, Principal Secretary of Health, Jharkhand, was supposed to join us. Due to some last moment urgency, he couldn't join us. So on our request, Dr. Rakesh Dayal, State Surveillance Officer, Jharkhand, is joining in his place. Thank you, sir, for accepting our request. I would like to invite you to deliver the special address. Over to you, sir. Sir, please unmute your mic. Sir, we still can't hear you. I think there are some issues. So, I think we should start a panel discussion. We will be starting a panel discussion on multiple phases of sickle cell disease. For this, I would like to invite Dr. Tulika Seth, Professor, Hematology AIMS. She will be the moderator of this panel discussion. And I would also like to panelists, Srimati Vinita, National Senior Consultant Blood Cell NHM, Minister and Family Welfare, Government of India, Professor Rameshwar Nath Kaul Bamzai, President, Genomics and Public Health Foundation, Adun, and Honorary Director, Delhi School of Public Health, University, and former Vice Chancellor, Shri Mata Vaishno Devi University, Katra, Shri Zakaria Ibrahim, Chairman, Bahrain Sickle Cell Society, Dr. P.K. Mohanty, HOD, General Medicine Project Coordinator, Sickle Cell Institute, Odisha, Dr. Dipti Jain, Professor and HOD, Pediatrics, Government Medical College, Nagpur, and Advisor Global Sickle Cell Disease Network. Dr. Tulika, I request you to please start the panel discussion. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. And I would like to thank the organizers and all my eminent panelists who are luminaries in their field. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Vinita Srivastava. Can I have my slides, please? So while the slides are being loaded, I pose a question to Vinita ji. You have told us so nicely about what is happening in the center. Can you tell us how you will be facilitating the states towards management for sickle cell?
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, there is a process of PIP process where we urge the states to put up the budget according for the prevention and management of hemoglobinopathies, right? So that there is a guidelines. According to those guidelines, which you were also a part of it. So according to the NHM guidelines of prevention and management of hemoglobinopathies, the states are urged to put up the prevention and management plan. They put up with the consultation with the government of India, and after that, we give the enough funds to take up the issues in these states. The funds are being given for prevention, for awareness programs, for management programs, for establishing of ICHH center, which is Integrated Center for Hemoglobinopathies, and for training itself. So if you see, in 29 states, the program has already been initiated, and now it's the time where we have to focus more on these hemoglobinopathies, which includes thalassemia and sickle cell disease as well. So the screening, which is a very important part of prevention, has been initiated in these states, but to the endemic areas only. And now, with the further strengthening of the program, we will be supporting these states in a much better way. Thank you.
Thank you. That is really enlightening. I pose a question to Dr. Bamzai, who is a doyen of genetics in our country. Sir, can you please enlighten us on the genetics and origins of sickle cell disease and some of the novel aspects of pathophysiology? Next slide, please.
Professor Bamzai, you need to unmute yourself.
Is it okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Next slide. Yes.
Next slide.
Stop.
So, giving the genetic and genomic perspective, sickle cell disease is caused by a single base mutation. Next slide. In a subunit protein of hemoglobin, which is beta globin, which is part of a 17 kilobase DNA region, which is occupied by the globin cluster in the short arm of chromosome 17. Chromosome 11. The single base change results into a missense mutation in the first exon of this beta globin gene at 6th codon, and it gets replaced with a hydrophilic amino acid is replaced, which is glutamic acid, that gets replaced with hydrophobic valine. For sickle cell disease to occur, the mutation has to be inherited from both the parents, generating homozygous condition for the recessive gene. Such heterozygote parents have a 25% probability, that's 1 in 4, of producing sickle cell disease child. Although each conception is an independent event, the heterozygote parents also have a 10-fold resistance towards getting malaria. That's how this gene has been favorably selected in evolution in malaria endemic regions. Can I have the next slide? Besides the sickle cell mutation generating the sickle cell disease in a homozygous condition, next slide, the sickle mutant is also co-inherited. Can I have the next slide? It's also co-inherited with other variants within the beta globin gene, such as hemoglobin C or beta thalassemia, beta plus thalassemia or beta zero thalassemia mutations, and also other rare variants. Now, why I highlight this, because this adds to the genetic and clinical heterogeneity of sickle cell disease patients we do not normally focus on. Within the beta globin gene cluster, a set of variations generate different haplotypes, which are specific for some populations. Although for India, it's suggested for tribals to have a unicentric origin of sickle beta globin, which is named as Asian Arab Indian haplotype, which is present in a majority, in almost 91% people with the disease, with a good percentage showing overexpression of fetal hemoglobin, which is mild form of the disease. However, yet the comprehensive genomic epidemiology data correlated with clinical outcomes and wellness is not available in Indian population. And I suppose future screening programs should probably include this. Next slide. Further, the differential clinical outcomes involve multiple genes. And you can realize from this slide that how many other genes could get involved, and there can be a complex interaction between them, which is essential for recognition of risk factors, ultimately for efficient management. Next slide. Like we are suffering from COVID pandemic these days, like COVID-19, feature of cytokine storm also happens in sickle cell disease. It also triggers a cascade of inflammatory molecules and pro-inflammatory pathways, resulting in vaso-occlusion of microvessels. It will be a good idea, you never know, that repurposed drugs in COVID-19 situation might prove true for this disease or vice versa. Next slide. In the diverse genomic backgrounds responsible for acute and chronic consequences, it would be interesting to find immunophenotypes for detection or intervention so that it could be used much before symptoms occur or end organ damage happens. Now, this would evolve an individualized, personalized, precision medical approach to manage sickle cell disease patients. Next slide. Finally, sickle cell disease is not just anemia, it's though conditional anemia. And for prevention and advocacy, we need to have genetic counseling, prenatal diagnosis, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis with gene editing, CRISPR technology applied over there. This is futuristic. And of course, stem cell therapy and new drug discoveries. I would suggest that in new drug discoveries, we also include Ayush-based interventions, because when you are reimagining the medicine, as Narasimhan pointed out, and you have medicines with modifying effects, such Ayush-related medicines also can have a prophylactic effect, and wellness is there for the patient. There's no doubt about that. We need to have advocacy profiles adopted, and then we need to have an awareness program with empathy, which is fundamental besides genetic counseling of unmarried couples, as highlighted by Honorable Minister and Vinita ji as well, to prevent the occurrence of sickle cell disease in the country like India. Thank you for patient listening.
Thank you, sir. That was brilliant. You highlighted some very unique and not very well-known aspects. Thank you. Now I would like to ask Dr. P.K. Mohanty, next slide, please, who is HOD of Burla Medical College, to explain some principles of the medical management of adults with sickle cell and to touch upon some of the serious crises which these patients experience. Dr. Mohanty, next slide.
Morning to everybody. Speaking from Burla, Odisha. I am the project coordinator, as you have said, and this project is running from 2010, supported by NHM Odisha and government of NHM and state both. So primarily the management starts right from the birth, but we can have some strategies from so that according to that we can manage the patients. So patients essentially remains in 3 states. Initially, the patient may not have any problem, and in between there will be attacks of various problems, chronic acute complications. In sickle cell disease, as you know, there is a state when the patient only presents with mild anemia and mild jaundice. No other problem will be there. If you palpate, there may be a spleen. Otherwise, he is okay. He is doing his duty. But in case it is interrupted, this steady state is interrupted by several acute complications like vaso-occlusive crisis, and others which we have to need to manage. In addition to that, we have to also manage the chronic complications which are getting as a result of repeated vaso-occlusive crisis. Now coming to steady state, the basic drug which has been used over decades is has been folic acid, and the adult dose is 1 milligram per day, but only 5 milligram tablets are available, so we can use that. Then oral penicillin can be used up to 5 years of age. Dr. Jain will dilate detail more on that. Then vaccinations are essential, particularly pneumococcal vaccine, Haemophilus influenzae vaccine, hepatitis B virus vaccine, and influenza. These are the important vaccines to be given to the patients suffering from diagnosed to be sickle cell disease from early childhood, and counseling to avoid crisis and complication, hydroxyurea and blood transfusion in different stages, and the other two we do not have access. They are coming up, and hematopoietic stem cell transplantation, it is curative, but should be done in children and also nowadays done in adults, but that is not available here in our state. Similarly, gene therapy and other level therapies are coming up, which we do not have access to. Then coming to prevention of acute conclave, most important is vaso-occlusive crisis or painful crisis, which is suffered by the patients, and to avoid that, one must counsel the patient because many of them practice this strenuous exercise, as I have noted here, cricket, football, tennis, and others. Similarly, manual labor and other physically demanding professions can precipitate vaso-occlusive crisis, which can be life-threatening. Similarly, avoidance of exposure to excess heat and cold, avoidance of dehydration by taking adequate fluid, early treatment of fever, sepsis, and regular use of hydroxyurea. Hydroxyurea prevent vaso-occlusive crisis and other even requirement for blood transfusion and acute chest syndrome. So it has to be regularly used. If the person discontinued it for 10 to 15 days, even he can land up in crisis, severe crisis. Next slide. So earlier only 3 indications were there. This has been expanded following the evidence-based management, and we are also practicing this. If the patient is having 3 or more crises per year, pain interfering with daily activities and quality of life, severe or recurrent acute chest syndrome, severe symptomatic anemia interfering with daily activities or quality of life. Earlier, it was told as the anemia which is requiring 2 or more blood transfusion per year was an indication. So now it has changed since 2014 after this recommendation. Even infants more than 9 months of age can be offered hydroxyurea if the parents agree. By their counseling, we can ask them, we can offer them hydroxyurea. The other two situations, CKD, even in chronic kidney disease, which is also associated with sickle cell anemia, we can use hydroxyurea in a lower dose. In other conditions, compound heterozygous states like hemoglobin SC or S beta thalassemia and others, we have to take help of a sickle cell opinion of a sickle cell expert. In fact, we have found that hydroxyurea is effective in sickle cell D Punjab and also sickle cell beta thalassemia. We have got studies and which has been published in journals from our center. Thank you. Next slide. The contraindication, one must know hydroxyurea pregnancy, breastfeeding, absolute neutrophil count less than 2000, platelet less than 80,000, hemoglobin less than 5, hypersensitivity, and severe hepatic disease. So these are the contraindications to hydroxyurea one must know before starting hydroxyurea. Similarly, next slide. Similarly, before going on to start hydroxyurea, the patient and his if he's a minor, his parents has to be counseled about the consent has to be taken because it is a teratogenic, because it is a cytotoxic drug and needs continuous monitoring. They must agree for continuous monitoring, repeatedly come initially and as advised by the center. So complete blood count, quantification of the hemoglobin F, comprehensive metabolic profiling including renal and liver function tests to be done before prescribing hydroxyurea. Similarly, a pregnancy test must be done because hydroxyurea prescribed during pregnancy. All women having childbearing age must have a pregnancy test before starting hydroxyurea. Now there is another problem: unmarried young males who have not completed family, there is a possibility that their semen their sperm count may go down. Therefore, semen analysis has been added of late. Although studies are only found in mice, we are advocating this in our patients. Next slide. Now, another important treatment modality is blood transfusion, and this blood transfusion can be done in acute situation and chronic situations. Primarily acute chest syndrome, acute splenic sequestration crisis, stroke, hepatic sequestration, intrahepatic cholestasis, multi-organ system failure, and aplastic crisis. These are the indications for blood transfusion in acute complication of sickle cell disease. There are also situation where the chronic complication need blood transfusion, particularly for prevention of stroke, primary and secondary prevention of stroke, and perioperative situation to raise the blood before surgery, to raise the blood hemoglobin level to 10 gram per deciliter, and also a symptom, very severe symptomatic anemia. So you can go for blood transfusion. Next slide, please. Now, vaso-occlusive crisis is a hallmark of sickle cell disease clinical manifestation, and it is due to ischemia of the bone marrow and bone, giving rise to pain, severe pain, and it is managed by analgesics, fluid therapy, antibiotics, and oxygen. Opioid analgesics are advocated, but unfortunately, because of regulatory prohibitions, morphine is not available. So still now, at present, we are managing with tramadol injection, 100 milligram 3 times daily, and if required, we are adding of either ketorolac or diclofenac to manage the pain. And this one should know that this non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs should not be given to pregnant ladies before 12 weeks of gestation and after 8 weeks of gestation. Similarly, fluid administration, cautious fluid administration should be done. The patient is vomiting, intravenous fluid should be given, and oral if he is not vomiting and is conscious, all these things. Then antibiotics, various antibiotics can be used because one of the important precipitating factor is infection. Ceftriaxone is an important antibiotic which covers all the capsulated organisms, but one caution is there: in children, it can give rise to immune hemolytic anemia, which can be fatal. Adult, usually there is no problem. Oxygen inhalation should be given if the saturation drops below 95%. Next slide. Now, acute chest syndrome is a very life-threatening situation where the patient presents with chest pain, fever, tachypnea, pulmonary inflated in X-ray, and there will be hypoxemia. But in these situations, usually it follows severe vaso-occlusive crisis, and the patient has to be hospitalized, preferably in ICU. If not available, you can treat in wards also. But the most important therapy is oxygen. Oxygen therapy has to be given to keep saturation above 95%. Sometimes, however, the mechanical ventilation is required if the patient is not maintained on only supplemental oxygen. Other therapies include blood transfusion, because sometimes the hemoglobin level drops very quickly in acute syndrome, and also antibiotics like ceftriaxone and macrolides, which will cover the capsulated organisms and atypical microorganisms, which has been found very often in acute chest syndrome, which may be either because of pulmonary infarction or infection. Incentive spirometry is done to prevent onset of acute chest syndrome while treating sickle cell vaso-occlusive crisis, and overhydration should be avoided because it can proceed to ARDS. Infection, common infection, pneumococcal sepsis and meningitis in children, and in adults, osteomyelitis and other hepatobiliary infections, and accordingly antibiotics have to be prescribed. Next slide. The chronic complication of stroke, which can be prevention of stroke. Stroke is an acute complication, wrongly written here. So stroke can be prevented by prophylactic blood transfusion to keep the hemoglobin S less than 30%, and it is usually done. It can be primarily prevented, also can be secondarily prevented. Primary prevention can be done by transcranial Doppler velocity study, but it's not. This facility is not available. So prophylactic transfusion almost required every 3 to 4 weeks. Chronic kidney disease and renal manifestation is usual. You have to check for microalbuminuria and use angiotensin receptor blocker or AC inhibitors. Pulmonary hypertension, there is no perfect treatment for that, although several agents used in other situations are being tried. Similarly, another chronic complication is avascular necrosis of femoral head. During acute stage, you have to avoid weight bearing and use analgesic. Similarly, polylithiasis, gallstone, pigmentary gallstone is a complication, very common. And if that is causing problem, one can go for cholecystectomy. Leg ulcer is uncommon, very uncommon, and this can be treated by various local agents, like including zinc oxide, even GM-CSF or platelet-derived growth factor. So long time dressing and leg elevations are required for treating leg ulcer. Cognitive dysfunction because of repeated silent cerebral. In fact, we have no experience about this, but it is there. You have to know and manage. Similarly, chronic pain. One is mental neuropathy, the chin area numbness, chin syndrome, which is usually one of the causes sickle cell vaso-occlusive crisis. Following that, there will be chronic pain over the chin. So these are the different. There are many more. Time will not permit. Now, pregnancy and delivery is a high risk situation in sickle cell disease. Pregnancy imposes greater risk to sickle cell disease patient, as well as sickle cell disease exposes the patient to more of high risk pregnancy situations. So antenatal care is a must, and the patient has to be regularly followed up by a physician and an obstetrician. Monitoring of hemoglobin and urine examination has to be done. Top-up transfusion has to be done when the hemoglobin drops below 7 gram per deciliter as per NICE criteria. And crisis management, no NSAIDs, as I have already said, no non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or analgesic has to be used before 12 weeks for to prevent teratogenicity, and after 28 weeks to prevent early closure of patent doctors. So hospitalization is essential. Vaginal delivery is preferred, and spinal anesthesia is preferred over the general anesthesia. Next. So these are any more question if you have, I can authorize.
So thank you, Dr. Mohanty. That shows your vast experience in the topic. I now request Dr. Deepti Jain to define a VOC. And if a child comes to you crying, could this be a VOC? Dr. Deepti Jain has vast experience and has done seminal work for pediatric sickle cell disease. And I would definitely advocate everyone to read her papers. Dr. Deepti, please.
Thank you, Dr. Tulika. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay.
Next slide.
Actually, VOC is a pathophysiology, which it's a very complex mechanism, which we are not going to go into, but it produces many symptoms. And one of it, and the cardinal feature of sickle cell anemia, is acute VOC, clinically pain. That is the cardinal feature. And it is very unique. The pain in sickle cell is unique because it is unpredictable, abrupt, recurrent. And the site of pain changes with age, especially in children. So it's very unique. And one has to be, even the caregiver, the health provider, the parents, they have to be educated for such presentations and what has to be done for such pain. And you are most of the time, children below 2 years are brought by the family as complaint of the child is just crying, madam. We have been to 2 doctors, we have done an X-ray, we have done oxygen saturation, everything is normal, but the child is crying. Because in children, the first presentation is dactylitis, that is swelling of the fingers. There can be hand-foot syndrome, but the presentation is like they think edema over feet hai, thoda sujan aa gaya, and they neglect that. And even for that sign to come, it takes some time. So the first thing is cry of a child. And so it is painful. And one has to think about sickle cell. Many a times we detect, at least especially in our part of the country where sickle cell is so common, any child crying, we have to suspect sickle cell disease. And the pain, as Dr. Mohanty said, is of acute and chronic. Chronic pain is seen more in males. But even chronic pain is when pain persists for more than 3 months. But I would bring attention to a pain called as neuropathic pain, which he did mention. About 40% of patients have numbness, pain in the chin, and that is neuropathic pain. And the reason I want to talk about it is the treatment is different. We have to give drugs like gabapentin, and our NSAIDs and other drugs are not going to work here. Next slide, please. I think most of the management, next, has been covered by Dr. Mohanty, so I'm not going to repeat that. Next, please. Next. I will talk something about the preventive pharmacotherapy, and pain management is a multi-pronged approach. It's apart from drugs, you also have to now, which has been shown by studies, that cognitive behavior adjuvant therapies like yoga, meditation, music therapy, acupuncture does help. And for preventive pharmacotherapy, we have hydroxyurea, we have FAD approved now, L-glutamine and crizanlizumab, which are used in other countries, not yet in our country. The studies are going on. Other thing I would like to add here is take pain as a disease. It's very important to consider pain as a disease and not just neglect it and give paracetamol and NSAIDs, because every episode of pain is damaging an organ, which will manifest later as multi-organ failure. So take pain as a disease. Any other question?
Ma'am, the infant mortality in sickle cell disease is very high. Can you comment on what can be done for this?
Yeah. It's actually the greatest chance of dying in sickle cell disease is the first year of life. First year of life is the greatest mortality, which we mismanage because we do not diagnose. And hence, many of these causes of early death are preventable or can be effectively treated. So it is important to do neonatal screening in this in our country for sickle cell disease, because we have much to offer. Prevent death, prevent morbidity. In this next one, please. In this children with sickle cell disease. Next slide. Now, neonatal screening. We have an opportunity to educate parents, put the child in a comprehensive health program. Now, what is this comprehensive health program? Sickle cell disease children are, in first 1 year of life, are 100 times more prone to infection than a normal child. So, penicillin prophylaxis, giving special vaccines, which Dr. Munda already talked about, but I will add typhoid vaccine. It is very important, typhoid vaccine, because we do find salmonella in our part of the country. And the other cause of death in first 1 year of life is severe anemia due to sequestration, splenic sequestration. For that, the parents, the mothers are taught how to palpate spleen. And once they find that the spleen, every day, twice a day, they palpate spleen. And if the spleen size increases, they know that the child is going to go for a sequestration crisis. This is a abrupt fall in hemoglobin. And if the child is treated within hours, we can save the child. The other causes are stroke and other things, but death is usually due to infection and sequestration crisis, for which we can put them in comprehensive healthcare program and prevent morbidity as well as mortality.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. I wanted to go back to Vinita ji, Vinita Srivastava ji. Can you comment on the high numbers of patients who are there in the tribal areas? And is there any convergence that is going on with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs? And how effective do you think that convergence will be?
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, with the regular licensing, we are in process of having a effective convergence with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Actually, they are into screening programs. If you know about that, they are into screening programs, and after identifying the patients were not being properly treated. So what we have asked them, the once the data for the screening is being done, they have to share with us, and we take care with these patients in our ICHS centers, which are being developed in the, especially in the tribal areas as well. So if you see in some states like MP, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, Odisha, we have much of the ICHS centers which are working day and night to cope up with this disease. So we have much of the monitoring. The blood banks have been established over there. If we don't have a blood bank, we have a blood storage center at that place. So and special monitoring systems have been incorporated. So those things which my previous speakers are speaking, like penicillin is available, hydroxyurea is available. So all these things are available at those places to take care of these patients. See, educative programs, we were thinking that it should be in the regional languages. So, and while regional languages also, the tribal of people do understand in a way where we can put up in a song and drama division. So we have requested song and drama division to come up with some of the activities, doing IC activities for them, where they can understand with their acts what is going to happen in their future life if they have to suffer with this trait only. So those things are important. Special attentions are being paid for the women who are with the SCD and are pregnant. So that is very important that these women are being taken care from the initial stages. So once they have been conceived, their proper care has been that the protocol has been developed and shared with the state that how these women are to be taken care of. The other things which we have done about the newborn screening, especially in the tribal areas, it's also important. So DEIC has been established, and in DEIC's centers, we are taking care of these newborn children who are having the STDs, and we are also trying to tell their parents also. So now the parents and patient counseling is being done at DEIC centers, the adolescent centers, the women coming to our facilities for their antenatal screening, and as well as for the adolescent screening. And
Thank
for
you.
the and
I'm getting a warning that we're running close to end of time.
okay. And for rehabilitation, to lead a better life, this is all important that we are also taking care with the special social Ministry of Social Justice. That's all.
Wonderful, wonderful, innovative measures, very exciting. Now, the last but not the least speaker we're very, very honored to have is Zachary Abraham Al-Khadim, and he is a patient and he is in charge, he's the chairman of the Bahrain Sickle Cell Society. And it's very important to have a patient voice, and we can learn from the innovative strategies that they are doing in Bahrain. So next slide, please. And the mic is over to you, Zakaria ji.
Thank you all for inviting me and hearing such an effort in India. I see so many inspiration, efforts and goals. I would like to talk about Bahrain story, which is, it is an experience we have gone through. I don't know if you can see my slides is there or not. If it is not there.
No, it's there. We can see. Thank you.
That's there. Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah, the next, please. Yeah, can we go for the last one for the result? Then we'll come back to the first. Yeah,
One back.
Yeah,
one back.
Backward. One back. One back. Yeah, this one. We will talk about this. What is this? This is the result what we had in Bahrain. When I say in Bahrain we have done this, it means we haven't used much budget or money to do this such a result. We have done something rather than to spend so many money. When we started to do screening, we were having in 2006, we were having for a new baby with sickle cell every 100. Then in 2010 we had 4 every 1,000. Then in 2014 we had 6 every 10,000. And also we are the age expectancy when we started, it was 42. Then we reached to 55. Now it is 65. The adult mortality being reduced to 62%. And we had for the past 10 years, 0 mortality in the child or adolescence or maternity. These type of or these kind of results, this is not a magic. It comes because we believe we can do and we can change. Can we please go to the first slide now? Now, I will let you know what is Bahrain and what is going on in this country. The population is 1.5 million. The citizen of Bahrain is around 700,000. We have 9,000 people who live with sickle cell registered, and we have another number. We don't know that number yet because they don't have symptoms. And we have a carrier, 65,000 a carrier. We have 28 primary care units, which means every 8 to 9 kilometer square, you will find one. And we have 3 main hospitals, public hospitals in the Bahrain. And we have 1 sickle cell center who take care of sickle cell patients. Next slide. Why we have done this, or what is the Bahrain team, sickle cell team? We in Bahrain, we decide not to work separately. We decide to work like a partnership. We, as a patient and the care provider and the decision maker and the policy maker, we are on the same board, on the same table, negotiating, suggesting, looking forward for the challenges. That made us to understand more about each challenges. So I know what is the Ministry of Health had type of challenges. Doctors, they understand more about sickle cell patient challenges. What is our childhood challenges? What is schooling challenges? What is the type of challenges finding a job or keeping that job, or finding a couple to marriage, or to be disconnected, socialized, or economically you are disabled. All these type of challenges being understood. Ministry of Labor is with us, Social Affairs is with us on the same boat, Ministry of Education. All the parties, they are all together to build the what we had of the result of this access. Next slide, please. Before we were doing this, or we start doing this, average waiting time to see a doctor, it was 8 hours. For the past 5 years, it is 25 minutes. When I say 25 minutes in average, it doesn't mean you have to see a doctor in 25 minutes. You see a doctor in 6 minutes. But 25 minutes means you actually been seen and took care. And in your way home, within 25 minutes, doctor either you will finish your treatment and you will receive your medication, or within 25 minutes, doctor will decide you need a hospitalization, or within 25 minutes, you need to be kept for 8 hours under observation. Length of stay. We were having before this the setup, the average is 21 days hospitalized. Now it is only 5 days. And we have a multidisciplinary clinic, so sickle cell patient will be seen by 13 different specialties, doctors, ortho, gynae, cardio, hematologist, pain management, etc., every 8 weeks. And all these doctors the patient will be seen by all these doctors within 2 hours. Then they will map or they tailor his plan or his treatment plan. Also, because people hesitate to go for hydroxyurea. People they don't want to go for hydroxyureas, but since then it was at that time 11% who were on hydroxyurea. In past 5 years, we reached up to 51%. Also, we have a blood exchange around 310 patients who do blood exchange in regular basis. The operation process, due of complications, and either it is joint replacement or whatever might need, before takes around 2 to 3 years to schedule you on the public hospital to operate you or to solve your problem. No, it takes only 2 weeks. I can say Bahrain decide to sit together, patient, doctors, decision makers, and to agree that we can change. In 2012, Dr. Ishaq who came to us in Bahrain, visited, and he saw lots of conflict between the providers and between the patients, and each of them looking at the other party, they don't understand, and sit together and just listen to your challenges. Since then, we sat that it is our privilege that to see our Prime Minister every week. We see our Majesty King 4 times a year. We see the Crown Prince every 4 months. And we are in touch with the Minister on daily basis, Health Minister. These made us so far to build our infrastructure and to make or to write our own story. Sickle cell has so many challenges need to be addressed. Sickle cell patients, they can understand, they are smart, they know well their disease. It's not about finding a job only. When understanding when this patient come to the doctor rooms, sometimes we see conflict like stigma about the pain, and everybody will look at the patient like he's looking for the painkillers. The judgment here, when we see the patient and we judge the patient on his weaknesses moment, in his pain moment, and this is unfair because you have to see this patient through his success. When he is well, he's a doctor, or he's a teacher, he's an engineer. Also, the patient, they need to understand there is no a doctor who want to see him suffer. We should build, both of us, either the patient, either the doctor, to build our trust reserve, and each of us has to put an effort to make. I should trust my doctor, doctor should trust the patient. We saved so many lives. 62% reducing the death is it is not an easy task. Saving one, it is too much, but it is we need more, and we have done that. 62%. Can we do more? Yes. Also, we want to patient to listen to us. For example, I have seen, because each country has different challenges. If you go to America, they may have challenges about bills, about paying their bills for medicine or for doctors. Also about the narcotics. While in Bahrain, our government is paying everything, but we spend a lot about educating the patient, educating the community, educating the family, and educating the doctors. And we have seen, because we are living in the hot weather, we have seen that dehydration is one of the challenges. And when we ask people to drink water, to have enough fluid, people, they hate water and they don't want to drink water. And this is the prevention. We can fight our disease and we can live our life or our day painless if we had enough water. Especially women, by nature, they hate water. But I realize that people, they like watermelon. And it is funny. So I said, why not to promote the watermelon? So I thought to myself,
So
and
thank you,
yeah.
Zakaria. We're getting
Yeah.
signals from the organizers to wind up, but it's been fascinating listening to you. And I
Yeah.
think all the speakers were absolutely wonderful. I'm sorry for cutting people off, but we had to stick to time. I think each and every one of the speakers had so much knowledge and so much wisdom to share with us. We could have given each speaker at least 1 hour to talk. But I think we've had a little bit of a discussion touching on some of these things. Now, I really hope that this discussion can be taken forward and all the people in the panel and all the other eloquent speakers before us. I hope we can work today and take this forward so that our sickle cell patients can have a much happier tomorrow. And again, my apologies to the panelists because I was rushing you all, but there's so much that we know and so much that we still need to know, as Zakaria ji was talking about, how little innovative things can help to improve the quality of life of our patients. So thank you to the organizers, and let's all work together to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tulika, and all of our respected panelists for this extremely insightful discussion. We also have a video message from one of our panelists, Ms. Landre Tunze Azai, CEO, Global Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organizations. She was unable to join this conclave due to time zone differences, but we are extremely grateful to her for sending this video message. Can we please play the video?
Last.
so much, Ms. Landry, for her video message. Dr. Rakesh Dayal, State Surveillance Officer, Jharkhand, has joined us again. Sir, I would like to request you to please deliver your special address. Over to you, sir. Sir, we can't hear you.
Mr. Dilip, we cannot hear you, please.
Sir, we can't hear you. You are not properly audible. I think the issue is still there. So, Dr. Umang Mishra, State Program Officer, Sickle Cell Anemia, Government of Gujarat. Sir, I request you to please deliver your special address. Over to you, sir. Sir, we can't hear you.
Dr. Mishra, we're not getting your voice. I'm afraid we're still not able to hear you. Manvi, I believe there is some problem. We can move ahead.
Okay, sure. Moving towards the end of this conclave, may I please invite Shri Saumil Modi ji, General Manager, Novartis Oncology India. Sir, I request you to please deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Manvi. Good afternoon, everyone. Namaste to everyone across. It's been wonderful today to be a part of a stimulating discussion on strengthening the wellness ecosystem for sickle cell patients in India. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Novartis India, I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to everyone who's present on the call today. Especially a big thank you to all the participants from India and globally, and we have more than 350 people who attended this webinar today. A big applause to each and everyone, and thank you very much. I would also like to thank, and it's a great honor to extend gratitude to all our valued speakers. I'd like to thank Shri Arjun Munda ji, Honorable Minister of Tribal Affairs, Government of India. Sir, thank you very much for taking time out of schedule to share your thoughts and government initiatives, and also explaining us the economic and the social burden of this disease on the patients and the society as well. Our sincere thanks to respected President of FICCI, Mrs. Sangeeta Reddy. I would also like to thank Srimati Vinita Srivastav, National Senior Consultants, Blood Cells, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Professor Tulika Seth for coordinating an excellent panel discussion, Mr. Bamzai, Mr. Pradeep Mohanty, Mrs. Dipti Joshi, Mr. Ibrahim Zakaria. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. And we exactly know what initiatives you've taken in Bahrain to ensure that the burden of the disease can be reduced. Manvi, thanks a lot for being our host today and also braving and championing the cause of sickle cell disease in India. An event like this, organized at a global level, requires a lot of planning and collaboration for weeks together. I'd like to thank the entire team at FICCI and also at Novartis for working together and ensuring that we have such a good program today. While we've come to an end of this session, this surely is not the end of our commitment towards the cause. For us at Novartis, it's actually the beginning today on World Sickle Cell Day, and we reaffirm our action and commitment to work as a community towards development, betterment, and empowerment of patients with sickle cell disease. We are sure that together we can achieve more. Thank you once again, everyone, for being here this afternoon. It's been a great pleasure connecting with all of you. Goodbye for now, and have a great day and a healthy and a safe stay as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. As Dr. Kalam says, you have to dream before your dreams come true. We dream of a world free of sickle cell and the allied pain. With all the energies we put together, it will be truth one day. Wishing for a better tomorrow. With this, we end the event. Goodbye for now. Have a great day ahead. Thank you so much.